cow. Back-to-back weeks, Brian. Maybe we'll make it a trend, or maybe we'll go the Kawhi Leonard route and do some more load management next week. Anyway, I'm your host, Dre Alvarez. With me, as always, is my producer, co-host, voice of God, Brian Foster. And you are on the Boxscore Geek Show, where we talk NBA news, analytics, politics, I don't know, whatever suits our fancy through the lens of basketball, Brian. Is that not a good tagline? We should work on a tagline.
Yeah, and it's been a tough January 2020. We're here on February 3rd, 2020 right now. For us in Northern California, the Warriors are basically mathematically eliminated from the playoffs already. The 49ers just lost the Super Bowl yesterday, gave a 10-point fourth quarter comeback, and of course we're in the middle of impeachment, and that's a big debacle as well. So hopefully February will be a better month for us.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. But yeah, let's run down. We're going to talk, just give some overview of the show. We're going to talk some comments on Kobe, the NBA trade deadline's coming up, which I love, Brian, pre-show. For our listeners who don't know, before the show, Brian was like, I know it's your favorite subject, Ray, because it's not, but we've got some good high level.
I did not say that, by the way. I was not being sarcastic. I said, I know you don't like this. I was not being sarcastic.
and then we'll talk there's a lot of fun and sad stories around the Super Bowl. So we'll do that. Before we hop into it, let's do our sponsor. I've forgotten a few times, but anyway, dailyroto.com. If you're familiar with daily fantasy sports or sports betting, apparently sports betting in the United States is turning into a really, really big thing, Brian. And, a bunch was bet on the Super Bowl. If I'd been more prepared, I'd have it on the script to actually discuss that. But as it stands, if you are into daily fantasy sports betting, dailyroto.com is a must for you. If you use promo code Nerd Numbers, I believe you get 10% off on various packages, which they'll give you ratings, odds updates, an optimizer. These things make sense to you if you do daily fantasy sports. So head on over, helps keep the light on. All right, on to the show. So last week we had a big old show discussing Kobe Bryant because obviously he passed about a week ago, and his impact is felt hugely. One kind of good story. How do you pronounce his daughter, Kobe Bryant's daughter's nickname? Because they're playing in her honor at the All-Star game, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might be Gigi, but I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, let me get the name correct. Let me get both correct. So, I believe it was Gianna. I hope I'm saying that right. And she went by the nickname Gigi, and her number was 2. So at the All-Star game, Team LeBron James, because remember a few years ago they changed up the All-Star game where the top vote getter in each conference is a team captain, and so LeBron James and Giannis, I believe, are the two captains, which is very apt. Giannis, apparently Kobe Bryant was a big mentor to him. LeBron James obviously played on Team USA with Kobe, went to the Lakers, a lot there. LeBron James says he's going to wear number 2 in honor of Kobe's daughter for his team. Because I believe they were originally going to do number 8 versus number 24, the two sides of Kobe. LeBron James has changed it up to do the daughter's number, which we are fully behind. So, all of that's gone on, Kobe Bryant's death, and so we did get some comments, and we talked about it last week. So let's talk that really quick. So Chris Ye, our best Warriors fan, Warriors, apologies. You're the best Warriors fan, Brian. Chris Ye, best Lakers fan, as we've noted, knows the numbers, knows the gossip, knows everything, was a huge Kobe fan as well, has been on the Boxscore Geeks show numerous times. And I think I haven't done this, but if we go over the Boxscore Geeks show, even if Kobe Bryant is not the topic, I would put the over-under at 5 minutes per show on the amount of time we've just, randomly ended up in talking Kobe territory with Chris, which means if you collected all of Chris Ye's appearances on the Boxscore Geeks show, we probably talked several hours about Kobe with him. He left a comment on my article about Kobe Bryant last week, where he said, an amazing what if is the 2006 season, which this is one of my favorites, because the Lakers, so I'll finish the comment, then comment on his comment. When the Lakers went up 3-1 on the Phoenix Suns, but the Suns came back because of a Tim Thomas 3 to send Game 6 to overtime. Had the Lakers won that series, it would have set up a hallway series against the Elton Brand, Sam Cassell Clippers, followed by a matchup with Dirk's Mavericks. We'll have to do a Kobe-centric episode in a few weeks, so we'll be really excited if Chris Ye is down to do that. Apologies, my watch keeps dinging. We'll definitely have to do a show like that. And that was an interesting observation I made in that article last week, which was Dirk Nowitzki and Kobe Bryant, despite being behemoths that played a 2 decades with their squads in the same conference, only faced each other in one playoff matchup. And I would argue, not to offend anybody, past both of their primes. So we were definitely deprived of some good Dirk v. Kobe matchups. And then on the same thread, Andrew Sutton noted another big set of what ifs is Kobe Bryant versus Kobe. Kobe Bryant versus Kobe, that'd be funny. Kobe Bryant versus LeBron in the playoffs or finals in both 2009 and 2011. So for those that don't recall, in 2009, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're primed to finally get LeBron James their title. They've won over 60 games. They've done a midseason trade for Shaquille O'Neal, which, by the way, a fun backstory. That was one of Arturo's first stories for Wages of Wins, was about how Coach Brown, am I getting that right? Coach Brown was the coach, I believe.
He was, yeah.
Coach Brown, how he royally apologies on all this stuff, on how Coach Brown royally messed up by playing Shaquille O'Neal in the playoffs. And as a result, the Cleveland Cavaliers lost to the Orlando Magic. And so we ended up with a Dwight v. Kobe. I'm just going to pull my watch up, right? A Dwight v. Kobe matchup in the finals. And then in 2011, of course, we could have potentially had another Lakers, although this time against Miami, but then Dallas did the upset. So essentially, that one time we mentioned, that the one Dirk series actually deprived us of a LeBron versus Kobe series.
Those are some good what ifs. Do you want me to read Chet Manley's comment as well?
And Chet Manley, this was on our actual YouTube of the show, and I like this comment. So yeah, I'll let you just read that straight out.
Sure, let's bring this up. So he talks about, the duality of Kobe, and he says it can be hard not to think of it as a binary thing, but it doesn't have to be. Kobe could have maybe learned and grown from the horrible thing he did, but there's no erasing it, regardless of whatever level justice she got and whatever good he does for anyone else. We can mourn the loss of a public figure that had some sort of impact on a lot of lives, even solely as an entertainer. And we also hate the fact that he got away with a horrible crime and hold that against him when thinking about his life as a whole. So, yeah, that's always something people talk about, right? With entertainers, separating the art from the person is what people like to say with, musicians. So it's interesting.
And musicians, movie stars, sports heroes. An annoying part about living in the world, Brian, is the number of people that have done amazing things, remarkable things, even productive things. Not to insult it too much, right? But being really good at basketball may or may not actually be great for the world, right? We could argue. Although I believe in the book Soccernomics, he noted that suicide rates in countries that won a World Cup went down, and it sustained itself. So there is something to the idea that, having something bigger than ourselves that we can all, collectively get behind and cheer for could be a good thing. And I had a really weird back burner theory that I might flush out, which is the Major League Baseball strike. So the Major League Baseball strike, according to the book Wages of Wins, did not really destroy the popularity of the sport. If we look at attendance didn't really fall. If we look at the value of the league, right, it's only gone up. Basketball and baseball both pay their players based on a percentage of how much money the league is bringing in. And so the fact that we have players in Major League Baseball like Bryce Harper and Mike Trout that are earning, close to $250,000 over like a 10-year deal. And then, of course, in basketball, we have players like Steph Curry and LeBron James earning, over $100 million on a single contract, over $30 million a year. Things have only gotten better. But my theory was that baseball has been known as like an old person sport. And that I think that when baseball went down, it could have contributed some to polarization in politics. Because if you look at a lot of how people treat politics, it's partisan, and partisan politics looks very much like sports fandom, right? Like you can see someone say Donald Trump didn't do anything wrong, which he did, by the way. We're team anti-Trump here on this show. If you didn't know listening to us, but this is your first show. But when you look at some of the rallies and I get to use the infamous both sides statement, when you look at some of the rallies on both sides, it reads more like a sports team, right? It reminds me so much of seeing like, the Packers Bears feud, which is huge out here. And I've got no data, and this is just kind of a back of the head thing, which is I wonder if the labor strike that kind of didn't hurt baseball's profitability, but maybe knocked it down a peg on the social importance ladder, if that didn't necessarily contribute to some more partisan politics.
Yeah, I can see some rationale to that. So, of course, we've had Professor Jonathan Weiler on this show several times. In addition to being a basketball fan, he writes about polarization in politics. And, he's talked about his latest book, Prius or Pickup, on this show before. And there's another new book out that kind of builds on that research. I know that because the author, who's Ezra Klein, has mentioned it several times. His book just came out. It's more about identity and identity stacking, from what I understand. So that's going to be interesting to see. But here's why I bring this up. I've been in the workforce for a while, and when you're just meeting random people, in a business setting, you have to learn how to make small talk, right? Like, you can't. Maybe some people can just be real all the time and are eccentric or whatever, but usually that's not the way it is, right? You need to talk about the weather or whatever, And sports was one of those things, right? Even if I knew a coworker or business partner was really a conservative Republican and loved, George Bush or whatever, we could still start talking about football, and because football is really big in California and everyone loves it, right? Something great to talk about. And that's, some cultural fabric that no matter what our political beliefs are, we have in common, right? And that's what Trump's trying to do, is unwind that social fabric and say, no, we're going to drive a wedge in the NFL now. And if you like me, you have to hate the NFL. So now there's this other, piece of identity that's now stacked up. If you're a Trumpist, you're anti-NFL. And that's something you don't have in common with the rest of America anymore. So, I think it's a strategy that he has employed. And I think there's something to what you just said.
And then just getting back to like the original point with Kobe, and if it matters, so many important people in history have problematic sides, and that is part of navigating the world. And as I mentioned on last week's show, I was like, we're not going to solve it on last week's show, and rest assured, we're not going to solve it on this week's show, where it's not even like the main topic. Stuff is complicated and hard, and there is a lot of dissonance around this person did something that helped the world, and this person also did something bad. And how do we reconcile that? And how do we honor and how should we honor that person? And it is a whole can of worms. The only telling part I will give to Kobe, this is what I should stress, and this came up on the Unpopular Opinion podcast this week where they talked about Kobe a little, is there are a number of public figures that have had equally messed up parts of their history, and it is interesting where it comes up. And so what I'm not saying is you're not allowed to be mad at Kobe. Quite the contrary. What I'm saying is people like Lindsay Gibbs, you brought her up on last week's show, who wrote a book about the Kobe trial, great on the Burn It All Down podcast, great writer. She was talking about the Kobe rape trial last week, and I'm like, I give that respect because this is a subject I've seen you talk about. There are random people that talk about it, and I go, the metaphor they came up with on the Unpopular Opinion show was like David Bowie. It's like there are other people that have done equally, if not more horrible things than some of these names. And how we deal with that as a society is not a question we can solve, but it is very signaling to say, when are you choosing to do it? So for Kobe, I've got no answers, but just the bigger lesson I would like you to take away is there is stuff you enjoy, and it is fine to enjoy it. There might be problematic underbellies of those things you enjoy, and welcome to the world. That's all I got for you. Like I think we've made this joke on the show a lot. It's like sometimes the world's on fire and people are in cages, and it's just like very nihilistic. I'm like, congratulations, good luck. Stuff's hard.
Yeah. And just for my clarification, what with Bowie, was it that he had unresolved sexual assault allegations from the 70s or something, and he never really addressed before he died? Was that the case?
believe so, and I haven't looked in depth. I mean, I'll even show my hand. They're like, I haven't even looked in depth there either. But it's just like there are a number. Like the funniest one is like say Bill Cosby.
Right.
Bill Cosby was a known joke. Like
Yeah.
Cosby and the Weinsteins. What's worth noting is like the show 30 Rock. You go to that show and there are entertainers making jokes. And after the Me Too movement and Cosby and Weinstein got their day in court, and I'd argue didn't, same point. Like I would argue neither of them paid what they owed to society, and it is what it is. You can go through pop culture and go, oh, this was a running thing that this was like an unspoken secret in the industry that everybody knew for decades.
Right.
And that's a lot of stuff. And like, that's why I'm saying, I'm like, no easy answer. I keep shaking my head. It's just like, I don't know. Like Kobe is an example of this, but he's not only is he not unique, he's like, might be more of a trend that we're used to seeing, and it's hard to know.
Yeah, that's well put.
Oh my God. All right, so let's talk more innocuous stuff. Let's talk the trade deadlines. What's been fascinating to me, I'll let you do some of the articles you linked to, but I just want to say this and give myself like a pat on the back. I am amazed to see D'Angelo Russell's name so highly coveted in the NBA, and really hope the Warriors don't screw it up. The pat on the back I give myself today is I looked this up. Both D'Angelo Russell and Donovan Mitchell have true shooting percentages just a touch above 56% true shooting. And in some eras of basketball, that might be good. But in the current era of basketball, if we look at the median team true shooting average in the NBA, which is currently the Indiana Pacers as of this recording, they as a team shoot 56.5% true shooting. And league average is 56.1% true shooting. So I've noted, if you think D'Angelo Russell is a great shooter, well, the fact that his number is right between two definitions of average should probably be a giveaway as to how he's not. And an even funnier one, Brian, to be mean, I saw some people comparing him to 2011 Monte Ellis. And first off, that doesn't quite track because the NBA has gotten harder as a scoring league, but I'll give this away to...
Monte couldn't even shoot threes, really.
Monte Ellis was not good that season. I think Monte Ellis had one good NBA season, hurt himself with a moped, and was never good after.
Yeah, no, it's this D'Angelo Russell situation is tough for the Warriors. So this is always, a tough thing with decision making, right? Is how greedy do you want to get? We generally say in the NBA you do not want to be greedy. And here's what I mean by that. So what the rumor is today that, and this has kind of been out there for a while, but the rumors are just the Warriors have no interest in trading Russell before the trade deadline this season. And there's some rationale behind that. The biggest one is the Warriors are hard capped right now, and they have to stay below that hard cap or they get the repeater tax, right, which is bad. So what they're thinking is they're going to wait until the summer when they are not hard capped anymore, and then they have more flexibility to make more moves. But I don't know. That's months away. That's an eternity in the NBA, and things can change. Like, what if Russell gets a really bad injury, or what if something surfaces with him outside the court and they can't trade him? So I use this word in the past talking about him, but there's so many arbitrage opportunities for the Warriors to trade him right now for some of those guys you mentioned. And here's the big thing about it. So you said he's a league average shooter, right? Same as Donovan Mitchell. If you're trying to win a championship, league average sounds okay, but it's actually bad. It's actually hurting you. If you're spending that much money on him, he's got a total contract of $100 million, something like that. That's all this money tied up in a kind of just an average deal, right? A player that's maybe mediocre. You can't do that. Those players need to be minimum salary players. They can't be maximum, right? So I think it's risky to hold on to him, but who knows? Maybe they're hedging and they will be able to trade him for Ben Simmons or something in the offseason. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the general Russell situation.
Okay, so here are a couple parts about that, as you noted. On the one hand, I would agree that there is an opportunity cost. That's one of the bigger issues that teams have here, which is if you have a mediocre player and you try and wait for a better deal to come along, a person we've mocked forever about this is Danny Ainge with the Celtics, who keeps acquiring all these assets and doesn't do anything with them, and then the team stays high 40s and wins but never turns into a contender. A person that we saw this happen with was Sam Hinkie. Admittedly, that was his plan, but that was our criticism, is saying he's doing really, really good, shedding bad contracts, getting good contracts, getting good draft picks, but eventually you have to do something with these or it's meaningless. Although, admittedly, my funny note is I was thinking that Sam Hinkie was waiting until the salary cap in the NBA exploded because they signed a new television deal that was worth tons of money, and they this wasn't necessarily known preemptively, but the NBA did not smooth their salaries, so every team in the NBA got a huge amount of payroll that they were able to use to woo new players. So my theory was Sam Hinkie was preparing for that offseason to finally fill up his team around whatever draft picks he had acquired by then, but he was pushed out of the league preemptively. So
Yeah, that's interesting because the Rockets and Warriors, who are basically the two most successful teams, well, two of them during that stretch, that's what they did, right? They waited for that cap to go up and just went crazy on it. So, yeah, Hinkie never got the chance.
We'll see if I go down the Warriors rabbit hole. We'll put a pin in it for the future. If I don't mention it on this show, we'll have to hit it again. It is a subject we've hit before about how the light years Warriors were really not all that light years ahead. But so there is something to the idea of opportunity cost, meaning if you have a player that is, you mentioned that great term arbitrage. So arbitrage, I've mucked up the explanation of this many times in the show, but it's like a term from financial trading. And the idea is you're basically dealing with an inefficient market. You can, I can take something that's overpriced here. I can sell something that's overpriced here while simultaneously like buying it while it's underpriced over here. And an example of a team that used to do this in sports was the Oakland Athletics. They would sign relief pitchers for below market value. They'd play well and they'd sell them for above market value and keep doing that. We argue the NBA is a market like this where players like D'Angelo Russell, I can go trade to a team for above market value for them and then turn them into players like, say, Andre Drummond or Ben Simmons who are below market value. And that's an arbitrage opportunity. And we think that teams in the NBA should really be able to take advantage of this. And opportunity cost is waiting too long to do this. In the Warriors case, what's frustrating is the NBA recently changed the draft lottery odds to give more of an incentive for mediocre teams to get incrementally worse. So what happened was the NBA, it used to be if you were the worst team in the league, you get 25% at the number one pick in the NBA draft. And so that led to teams like Sam Hinkie's 76 potentially giving up preemptively on an entire season. And the NBA didn't like that. So what they ended up doing is they ended up flattening it so that the bottom three teams all got 14% at the number one pick. But that energy got pushed somewhere. It got pushed in these other teams, which is to say, right now, for instance, they are the worst team in the Let's say hypothetically the Warriors are the sixth or seventh worst team in the NBA. They can improve their odds of getting the number one pick by like 2% every draft, every slot they go up. So basically, there is incentive for the Warriors to get marginally worse no matter where they are in the draft lottery. And it's assured, as you noted, they are not making the playoffs. And what's frustrating about this, too, is teams overpay for draft picks before the NBA draft, if that makes any sense. So, for instance, I have the number 3 pick in the NBA draft. A strategy that we have mentioned many, many times is that you really should trade before the NBA draft. You should always flip picks unless you have like Ben. If you luck into the number 1 pick, if you luck into a Tim Duncan, if you luck into a Ben Simmons or a Zion, where every analytics nerd is telling you this guy is the de facto number 1, they're not going any lower than number 1. You have the number 1 pick, take it. That's fine. But if, say, you have the number 4 pick in the NBA draft, unless there's a player waiting for you that you really want, a la Luka Doncic, you have no problem flipping your pick. And for instance, the Celtics have done this a few times, right? They got the number 1 pick in the draft with Markelle Fultz. They flipped it for Jason Tatum, and they got a future draft pick. So it's like that's what we highly recommend. So as a result of this, the NBA, by flattening out the draft lottery, as I mentioned, has really given an incentive to teams that aren't going to make the playoffs to just get bad and stay worse. And so while we might argue the Warriors should really, really just trade D'Angelo Russell now, On the one hand, doing better this season would probably improve attendance and might help them a little in the future. But if they don't trade D'Angelo Russell and do really bad, they're going to get a better draft pick for next season, and they can trade D'Angelo Russell in the offseason. And we saw this happen, for instance, between the Lakers and the Pelicans. The Pelicans didn't want to trade Anthony Davis to the Lakers midseason. And a big reason is exactly what we're saying. If they had traded Anthony Davis for a bunch of young players, they don't make the playoffs, but they get marginally better, which means they get a worse draft pick. Whereas if they keep Anthony Davis, don't make the playoffs, do really badly, they get a better draft pick, and they got Zion, and which is also a better asset. So the NBA has really incentivized this. So with the Warriors, what's annoying is they're at a point where I am saying holding on to D'Angelo Russell is not a bad strategy, provided they trade him for something good. The flip side argument I'd give you, though, is if a really, really good offer comes along. So the few players I think I mentioned to you pre-show were Ben Simmons, Andre Drummond, who was the other one? Clint Capella is now on the trading block, right, for the Rockets. Karl Anthony Towns, of course. If one of those four players were to become available in a D'Angelo Russell trade, for the love of God, take that trade, because if you wait, that player could be gone in the offseason or change their mind, or the team change their mind. So from the Warriors' perspective, we're saying there's nothing wrong with you holding D'Angelo Russell. It is sound. We'll see what you do with it. On the flip side, I'm saying, like, do not pass on a good-looking trade if one comes available.
Yeah, that's right. And, one thing I should mention also is that, and this is something that we're not going to hear about because, teams stay tight-lipped on this usually, but the tampering angle, right? And what I mean by that is we knew about a year ahead of time that the Warriors were pursuing Durant. They might have known months in advance that they were going to get him, and that, changed the way they built their team. So if they're tampering with some other superstar right now, like, for instance, we saw Curry talking with Giannis after the game, and people were reading the last time those two teams played, right? People were reading Curry's lips, and he was saying, let's go do this thing together, or something like that. So the speculation, they have the same agent. They're tampering for Giannis. So maybe the Warriors have some deal that they know they're going to do in the offseason, but we just don't know that, right?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I'm gonna leave it on the table because I could go.
And then the other side of that, though, is we've seen teams do that in the past and then get burned because the player changes their mind, right? So
we're looking for a roommate.
Yeah.
He wanted
And
someone super
ESPN
quiet.
wants you to know that. Sorry.
Yeah.
ESPN has some kind of like Italian bistro commercial going on there.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, I think that we call this the Patrick Picasso principle. This idea that if you find a rare good that is well below market price, you just don't wait, you go for it. And that's the funny thing about the NBA is there are a handful of players that are difference makers. Andre Drummond's borderline when he's been playing at his top. He's definitely this. Ben Simmons is for sure this. Karl Anthony Towns. That if you get an opportunity for that player, you just take it and you're fine. And so that is our bigger point about D'Angelo Russell or whatever, and what you just said about changing their mind. It's like, if this thing can happen, go ahead and do it, and we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, so I can talk about some of the specific Russell rumors that are going on right now, just to kind of so we can solidify where do we draw that line, if we should pull the trigger or not. So the Wolves do want him. That's a big rumor because he's friends with Towns. So Towns would not be coming back to the Warriors under that deal. So that makes some sense, right? The rumors are it's around Robert Covington and some draft picks, but then since the Wolves are rebuilding, they don't want to send the draft picks. And so speaking of Sam Hinkie, when we dissected his infamous leaked screed when he was fired by Philadelphia, one of the things, at least I thought was the funniest about it, is he spent pages and pages talking about Robert Covington, who was a younger player back then and wasn't that good. And we made fun of him for that. Like, why are you fixated on Covington? That's not what's going to change the team. Well, Covington actually got pretty good in the years since then. He's not great. Like, I don't know if he is one of those difference makers you're talking about, but he has a really good contract. So he's a valuable player. I'd be tempted to hold off till the summer, though, if that were the only trade that were available to the Warriors. You mentioned Drummond. I would trade him for Drummond in a second. Drummond's great, even though he's having an off year. For whatever reason, Drummond has no trade value right now. Nobody wants him, including the Warriors. So that's just not going to happen. I don't know why, but that's what's going on.
It's very obvious reason there and something that might have to happen. Drummond is on the last year of his contract. So that means Drummond, if you trade for him, is a rental. So
you do get his bird rights, though.
You do have his bird rights, but then again, it's still a risk.
Yep.
And it's funny the number of teams that are scared of risks like this, which is just amusing. It's like play to win. So we agree with that. We think you could trade for Drummond and say we can give you the best deal in the NBA. That would be fine.
I think they just don't like Drummond very much, which is unfortunate because we do like him. He's still young. He's having an off year, but I bet he'd be great on the Warriors. Here's another team that's getting interested, though. Apparently the Knicks are going to make a push for Russell. And my first thought on that is, who cares? I don't want anyone on the Knicks. I changed my mind after looking at their roster. If they would give up Mitchell Robinson, I would do that trade in a second. You'd have to take on probably Julius Randle to get the money there, but he's only on a 2-year deal, $8 million a year. And you could get Elfrid Payton in there as well to be the backup point guard with Russell leaving, who's pretty good. I would do that. You have Mitchell Robinson for another year or two on a rookie deal, and he's already like one of the best centers. That would be great for the Warriors. They could make a title run with him next year. So I would do that trade.
Yeah, by the way, I realized I forgot to put this on the script, but I figured I wanted to talk a little bit about it and also just note something odd because Marcus Morris, in a game against the Utah Jazz, the Knicks were getting blown out, and apparently Jay Crowder took a three, and this really upset Elfrid Payton, and he shoved Jay Crowder, and there was a big altercation. After the game, Marcus Morris was talking about it, and let's be clear before I get down any rabbit holes. Marcus Morris was sexist, and there's no two ways about it. And then after Marcus was called sexist, his apology was bullshit. So I want those two things out of the way before we go any further, because I'm gonna make some like flippant points about this. So I wanted to make sure that those overarching points were made first. Marcus Morris was being interviewed after the game about how upset the team got at Jay Crowder. And so what he did is he called Jay Crowder soft. He said the game was over and Jay Crowder's, out there draining threes on us. That's soft. And then he said something like, that's girly play. And so people are rightly calling him sexist for doing the thing of calling something feminine and using that as an insult. But so here's where I want to get a little flippant. And I couldn't find a good way to make a tweet out of this, right? It's hard to make a nuanced point in 280 characters. What he did is he called Jay Crowder soft and then equated that to being feminine, and then that's bad. That's the crux of how his insult laid out. But what was bizarre to me is I was going, wait a minute, you are upset the other team wasn't taking it easy on you when you are losing. Isn't that the opposite of soft? And so I wanted to point out this is both a sexist method of insulting people and just kind of one of these weird ways, which is you just make up what a attribute is, right? You basically say doing this thing is feminine, right? And therefore you are bad for doing it, when it didn't even flow logically, if that makes sense, right? Calling someone soft for not taking it easy on you when they're winning doesn't even flow. And then of course it's very, very sexist to say, hey, that's womanly of you, because it's like, why bother doing it? And of course a lot of people rightfully stood up and were like, the WNBA's got less flopping. What are you talking about? He rightfully got torched for that stupid comment to the point where he made a bad apology, and he did some of the things that I hate in apologies. He said, this is not who I am. It was a heat of the moment exchange. And you go, well, if it's in you, it is who you are. So you can say I made a mistake, but don't try and do this like, where did that come from?
That means you're someone who gets heated and does dumb things when you're heated. That's what it means. It is who he is, right?
Second part of the heated thing is it's like, this was after the game in front of a camera where you knew you were being filmed.
Yep.
There's none of this bullshit. So it was frustrating on all fronts, is what it is. And like I said, I didn't have a cohesive way to get there. It just popped up because obviously he's on the Knicks and there's no reason you should trade for him. The Spurs tried to sign him and got upset when he didn't sign with them. No team should want Marcus Morris, including the Knicks.
There's rumors, though, involving both sides of that today. Apparently, Knicks are going to bring him back and extend him. That's what they want to do. Additionally, the Jazz are another team that's pursuing Robert Covington. So there we go.
I mean, Robert Covington's interesting in that he's like a stretch four, but I think you and I would both agree he'd be better used as a three. The classic Dirk Nowitzki problem, right? He's this tall guy that teams are inclined to use as a power forward that really, if you use him as a small forward, is an edge, right? Because he's a giant. This is one of the biggest edges, say, the Philadelphia 76ers have right now with Ben Simmons. You have a center that's playing point guard, and that's such a huge mismatch. So why on earth would you try and play Ben Simmons as a center when you can play a natural center like Embiid and play Ben Simmons smaller if you're able to get away with that? I think you can do the same thing with Covington. Covington is a fascinating player, but yeah, he's certainly not one that I would be coveting. Haha. Although what does get fascinating and amusing about that exact point when I was talking about Sam Hinkie is you look at how much value he has and you look at how the 76, what they traded him away for and how that all panned out. And I keep getting back to this point is like, if you would let Sam Hinkie keep that team for 2 more years, I think a large amount of it is luck because Simmons is a generational talent and you can't see that coming. But if Hinkie got to keep the 76ers 2 more years, it would have been a much different NBA, and I would have loved to see that.
Yeah, I don't know if the Covington to Utah makes sense to me. Like they're already kind of crowded on the wings. They just re-signed O'Neal, like we said, and even though he's not that tall, they usually play him at small forward. They've got Joe Ingles, who's pretty good. He can play both forward positions. They've got Bogdanovich, who can play both forward positions. So I don't know how, I guess they would play Covington only at power forward and those guys at small forward and guard. Maybe that's what they do. Because if they think, I know that Mike Conley just came back from injury and is playing again. I haven't seen how good he's playing, but maybe they think Conley's not going to be a factor in the playoffs and they're just going to run, Mitchell at the point guard. So maybe that's where Covington would fit in, but we'll see what happens.
Interesting. So in this article, you sent along a Zach Lowe article, and I know there's a ton to go over. The interesting other big name that's on the block is Andre Iguodala. One of the ones that they are suggesting is a Mo Harkless filler draft pick trade for Iguodala. That would be amazing for the Clippers.
Yeah, there's a rumor that today that Iguodala said, "Yep, I'm just going to sit out for the whole season." That sounds like something that. So someone's leaking, to get more trade interest in him probably. But there was a rumor a few days ago that Dallas has a deal in place for him that can be done if needed. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Iguodala go to Dallas.
Iguodala to Dallas, Iguodala to the Lakers, Iguodala to the Clippers. It is. I saw someone that echoed what I think we've already said on Iguodala, which is the Memphis Grizzlies got greedy with him and are trying to get more. And anybody that's like, why doesn't he just shut up and play? It's going. The Memphis Grizzlies knew what they were doing. They basically said, we're going to hold you until we can get a trade for you. So there's nothing there. And there's nothing that says Andre Iguodala has to play for the Grizzlies. It is one of these cases where if the Grizzlies legitimately have a grievance, they could attempt to take it, and try and get his salary deferred or whatever. But we're on Andre Iguodala's side here. And, I mentioned on last week's show, I'm flustered on the idea that the, Lacob Gruber?
Yep.
I always mess it up.
Peter Guber. Yeah. He's a Hollywood producer.
That group that bought the Golden State Warriors for $400 million, and it's now, one of the most lucrative teams in the NBA. Them saying, well, we really need to save a little bit of money, and that's why we didn't keep Andre Iguodala around. That's on them. I'm not going to take the billionaire side that benefited so much. Both Andre Iguodala and Kevin Durant restructured their deals to take less money to get themselves on the Warriors. Those two players then, as a result, won three finals MVPs collectively for the Warriors. So for anybody to say that Andre Iguodala or Kevin Durant is selfish for leaving, or, in Andre Iguodala's case, not playing for the Grizzlies, they're just off. Those two players did so much for the Warriors. And if a billionaire that went up billions of dollars in value thanks to the play of those two wants to save millions of dollars, I'm not going to feel one lick bad for them. And then I know, I forget the name, but the new owner of the Rockets is basically, we're noticing this.
Tillman Fertitta, yeah.
Thank you. Is, it keeps getting rumored to want to cut costs and all this, and much different than Leslie, I believe, right? Leslie Alexander was the previous. Leslie Alexander infamously came up in the book, just forgot the book name, but it's a Michael Lewis book about Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky
Oh
about the.
yeah, the original book is Signal and the Noise, by Kahneman Tversky. The Michael Lewis book about them is The Undoing Project.
Thank you. In the Undoing Project, it is noted that Murray was told by Leslie Alexander he wasn't allowed to do the Hinkie route. Not allowed to tank, has to always try and win, et cetera, et cetera. The new owner is like, I don't want to overpay for Chris Paul, even if it's a title window, right?
Yep.
And so this new owner is a billionaire, and you go, all right, you've got a multi-billion-dollar asset, and you're trying to save millions of dollars in a stupid way, because we've noted that making the playoffs is worth millions of dollars. Making the playoffs get you future season ticket holders, which is more revenue. If you luck into a title, that's worth so much to the value of your franchise. So we just do not feel bad for billionaire owners that make short-sighted cuts that hurt the long term. That's just never going to happen. That being said, Andre Iguodala to any team out east and west. I didn't read the articles in depth as you did. Are there any Andre Iguodala rumors out east? Any place there?
No, I didn't read them all in depth either, but most of the rumors today is that he might sit out the whole season. So
I gotta buy that they eventually. So we kind of talk incentive. So we talk the incentive of the Warriors to hold D'Angelo Russell. Another player that there's incentive for, we didn't quite get into, is Andre Drummond. Andre Drummond, because he is not signed, he has no trade stock. So there is an incentive for the Detroit Pistons to trade Andre Drummond this season, which is why if he could go to the Warriors, I'd say just get it done. And the reason being, you cannot sign and trade a player after the fact, if this makes any sense. You can't sign and trade Andre Drummond for the same amount of money a team would be able to use his bird rights for. So if they trade him this season, they trade away his bird rights, and whatever team is allowed to then sign him for whatever. But if they wait till the offseason, they can only give him a 4-year deal with a 25% year-over-year raise, whereas if he got a max contract, that's a 5-year deal at a 30% year-over-year raise. So if Andre Drummond wants to get the best contract, it is in his best interest to get traded this season. And if the
Iguodala, right? Not Drummond?
No, I'm saying
Drummond. Okay. Sorry, there's so many Andres involved.
So many Andres, and they're all good.
Yeah.
Andre, I hate it as a nickname. My reason for that is my name is Andres, and people always leave off the S. That's why I go by Dre. It's a capitulation, but saying you're not allowed to call me Andre, that's a mistake. Dre is a nickname. Andre means you don't know how to say my name. But Andres in the NBA are awesome, right? So, I'm already a plural of Andre. I'm Andres, so multiple Andres. Andres in the NBA are great. Makes sense. So Andre Drummond, though, there is an incentive for the Pistons to trade him this season, because if they don't, if there is a team with salary cap available, he can walk for nothing.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So there is an incentive for them to get a deal done this season with him. Now, and actually in a similar case, Andre Iguodala's contract is expiring. Exact same point. If they don't trade him this season, they get nothing for him. So for both Andres, there is an incentive for the team to trade him or waive them this season, right? Because if they waive Andre Iguodala, they can at least recoup some money. So I don't buy for a second that Andre Iguodala doesn't end up on a contender this season. I think you're just noticing, right? It's PR savvy of somebody in Andre Iguodala's camp to say he might not play, because it's weird posturing in the land of negotiating an NBA. If you get in front of a microphone and say what you're thinking, you can be fined for tampering. So you have to have agents essentially by targeted advertisements through media sources, a la Adrian Wojnarowski, to say stuff. So I have done my goal, which is to avoid actually talking specific trade deals, trade rumors, but I figured we should at least get to some of those. So were there any other in that article you wanted to discuss?
No, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff. I think the big one we should talk about is Capella. We were talking, Rockets briefly, and one thing to start back onto the Rockets again is D'Antoni and Morey were already in place when Fertitta bought the team, right? Just like you mentioned, they had this deal with Alexander to never tank. So I don't know. Will he get impatient and fire both of those guys, and then the Rockets will be out at sea again? I'd be worried if I was a Rockets fan about what Fertitta is up to. And so I don't really understand why they're trying to trade Capella right now, right? They're trying to trade him for a different big man that's cheaper and maybe a wing player as well. Why not just keep Capella and try to win a title this year? So I don't understand where these rumors are coming from, but apparently Atlanta and Boston are both talking to Houston about trying to get Capella. And of course, Arturo is all over it as our resident Boston super fan. And he has proposed a few trades, both involving Cantor. And Cantor's having a great year. He might even be playing better than Capella so far this year. But for the playoffs, based on the past history of these two players, you'd probably want Capella over Cantor heading into the playoffs this year. So I can see why Boston is trying to get in on that.
One annoying part about Houston that I can note, and this is a classic problem with ownership, is not being good at talent evaluation. So this new owner is clearly not good at it. And so Capella is this classic person that we think is great at the box score geeks, right? This defensive-minded center that's really efficient at the hoop and then gets rebounds and stuff, right? That we have noted that is undervalued. Case in point, there is no value for Andre Drummond on the trade market. This same owner, I keep messing up. I'm not even going to try and say the name. The Houston Rockets owner allegedly said that Chris Paul was signed to one of the worst deals in the NBA, and Chris Paul did sign I believe, a 4-year, like $180 million contract. I'm looking it up at Basketball Reference. But what we said is he wasn't going to be worth it at the end, but you're able to just wait and then trade him off if you want to, right? You don't have to have Chris Paul the full 4 seasons. You can trade him off at the end. Now, it wasn't Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook straight up was not a big deal. The issue is that they traded away a bunch of picks, which are future assets. So it was actually a bad. So essentially, this owner is bad at talent evaluation. This owner wants to shed cap space. I think the problem with Capella is very much a Drummond problem. His free market value does not match what he is worth, and you're not going to get equal return back. So I think a smart team could fleece for Capella, and that could be a huge difference.
Capella's having a really good year, by the way, so I'm dead wrong about that. He's playing great. So, yeah, everyone should want him. Even at a max deal, he's one of the best centers, so it's very valuable to your team to have him on your roster, I think, at that contract.
Now, the interesting one you noted is Atlanta is rumored to be going after Capella, which is kind of interesting, but because they're in like the same boat as I was noting the Warriors, which is they're out of the playoffs, it's probably in their best interest to stay bad this season. But honestly, if they go with the route of Capella's on the market, we think we can get him. If it's for anything but Trae Young, I think they're fine. Probably John Henson too, right? If it's for anybody but those two players on the roster, you win. And that's kind of our thing, is when a player like Capella becomes available, don't wait, go for him if it's a reasonable trade and doesn't cost you a star.
Yeah, I think all that's going on is what we always talk about here, is that there's just such a you can always get star big men for cheap in the NBA right now. And I don't know if teams are legitimately just think big men aren't good anymore, or they're being greedy and are like, oh, we can get them for cheap, so we're never going to pay. But either way, it doesn't make sense to me. Like this, we've talked about this on the show a million times this year. If you look at all the teams that are dominating this year, especially the Bucks, these are huge rosters loaded with big players at all positions. So being big still wins in the NBA.
Actually, I want to just do that for fun really quick. So Milwaukee Bucks have Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then, of course, actually do have a legit center, Lopez, whether or not that's right or wrong. Fine. Los Angeles Lakers, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James, who are both legitimately
JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, all on the Lakers.
Toronto Raptors, I mean, they have Marcus Gasol, but that can't be it, can it? I'll look at that in a second. Toronto Raptors, pretty good. The Los Angeles Clippers, of course, have like Montrezl Harrell. Boston Celtics have Cantor. Denver Nuggets have Jokic.
And many more.
Utah Jazz, of course, have Gobert. Miami Heat have All-Star Bam Adebayo. So, yeah, you are right. Like every good team, every top seed in the NBA has.
Dallas is kind of the exception. They're one of the best teams in the West this year, but that's mostly because their big guys are kind of getting hurt. Like Dwight Powell got hurt, and they're a little bit of a smaller team, but I think Luka's kind of an exception there.
So that's a cheat code, and they have had good bigs. You know that. Of course, they have Boban.
Hey, Boban.
Let's see. It occurs to me, Brian, I forgot to add this to the script. I don't know how, but we did not talk any All-Star snubs.
Yeah, I was going to wait until next week, but we can talk that now.
I wanted to get this out, which is to say, I was impressed that Bam Adebayo out east made it. And the two players that I was shocked about were Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. I actually thought by my criteria, which is if a player is good enough, fine, they deserve it. And then if they hit enough normal benchmarks, basically points per game, I'd expect them to do it. I thought Devin Booker would have been in the All-Star game, and I do not understand how he got in behind Donovan Mitchell. There is nothing you can convince me about Donovan Mitchell belonging in the All-Star game over him. And then out east, there was a name that was pretty obvious, I seem to recall.
Other in addition to Beal?
Bradley Beal did not make
Right.
it, so I'm very confused why he did not make it out east. But I was kind of surprised by those two. I thought yay points they would have been in. And yeah, I think you're right. We should push that off till future because we're not going to be able to give it in depth. And I don't have any of my research or any of my notes in front, so it's not a lot of fun to hear us stumble about it.
Yeah. We can talk the All-Star game next week.
All right, last topic, Brian. Super Bowl. A lot of stuff happened. So apparently, Kyle Shanahan's MO is to give up 90% expected chances to win. For those that did not watch, the Kansas City Chiefs came back from being down 20-10 in the fourth quarter, and I believe also they had a third down with 15 to go, with 6 minutes left. So the probability charts had them at like a 93% chance to lose. Now, I've noted this before. I don't know how accurate the probability charts you see at a 538 or ESPN or Pro Football actually are. I don't know if anybody's done back testing on them. So I can't guarantee that number was accurate, but clearly there was a good chance that if they'd had to punt or, given up the ball at wherever they were, that the 49ers could have just stalled and probably won the game. But Pat Mahomes is dead. Patrick Mahomes throws a 40-yard bomb, manages to get a touchdown, then they get the ball back, second touchdown. Kansas City Chiefs come back to win it. Amazing game. And like I said, Kyle Shanahan was apparently the offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons, who lost to the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl with a similarly better actually, I believe. The Falcons had an even better chance of winning according to the numbers. So that happened, which is definitely fascinating and interesting. And then the second story I was going to have on that is that the frustrating part about this game is that there weren't any good guys, or I would say heroes. I want to use because if you look at both teams, like they both have like a lot of baggage. As an example, the 49ers, of course, notoriously are the people that kicked Colin Kaepernick out of the league. That's on their history. Is it Nick Bosa? Is that the person's name?
So, okay, Nick Bosa, he's pretty young still. He's a rookie. He's probably 21 or 22. Yeah, I mean, he has a social media past when he was a teenager of saying all this crazy shit. And his family and himself are known like MAGA Trump guys. But since he came to the 49ers, everyone likes him apparently. And it's mostly probably because he's a good player and the team's winning. But yeah, I mean, if they weren't winning, it would probably be a different situation.
So there's that going on. The Kansas City Chiefs, of course, have the racist chant, and then of course Chiefs in the realm of Native American inspired sports names is not the worst, but still one of those weird like.
Have we talked about why they're the Chiefs yet on the show? Did we talk about that last week?
I did not know this. So what's the deal?
The reason why they're called the Chiefs is because they were in Dallas. I think they were the Dallas Texans or something like that with. The Cowboys were there as well. So they're like, okay, we're going to move somewhere. The mayor of Kansas City at the time says, sure, you can come to Kansas City, but part of this is you have to change your name to the Chiefs. That was the mayor's condition. Why? Because the mayor, a white guy, of course, at the time, whenever this was in the 60s or 70s, his nickname was the Chief. So why is this mayor of Kansas City's nickname the Chief? Well, he's this big shot Boy Scout troop leader, apparently, and he had invented this whole like fake Indian tribe for all his white Boy Scouts to be a member of. And, they have this whole culture and everything that they built up. So that's why they're the Chiefs. They're after an appropriated Boy Scout tribe.
Well, there you go. And of course they have the stupid Kansas City Tomahawk chant, which is racist. So all sorts of that. Now,
so I forget about Tyreek Hill, Dre. Do you know about him?
Dear God, what else do we got?
Yeah, he's known most recently, I think. His son got a broken arm, and that was never resolved why. It could have been abuse. and he also abused his girlfriend and hit her while she was pregnant with the son. So, not really clear why he's still in the league, but he is, and he just won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, the NFL is not. We were saying it's like about Kobe, and then saying bad news. This is not unique. NFL is just as bad, and then there are lots of things with how, like domestic assault, domestic violence, how the NFL handles players that have issues like that is horrible, and it's going to look really, really. If the NFL is still around in 20 years, how they handled some stuff is going to look really, really, really bad. The feel good story, of course, are Patrick Mahomes winning a Super Bowl. You have an African American quarterback winning a Super
I believe
Bowl.
the youngest
And
quarterback ever to win a Super Bowl as well. He's only 24.
and I hope I say her name right because I've only read it in print. But Katie, I'm going to let you finish the last name because there's like 3 ways you can do
I
it.
don't know. I think it's Sowers, but it could be Sowers or something else. Yeah.
Katie Sowers, first female coach. Obviously, she's not the head coach, but she is a female coach for the Kansas City Chiefs.
For the 49ers.
Or wasn't she for the Chiefs?
No, unless she switched in the middle of the game. Heading into the Super Bowl, she was on the 49ers.
So actually, that's a bummer. So she was on the 49ers side. Apologies. So she was on the 49ers side. They lost. So again, you have lots of feel-good stories, both sides, and is what it is. Who wins, who loses.
I'll just say something weird about watching the Super Bowl commercials is, they're a big deal, right? They're very high budget. They're quirky at times. They can be kind of weird, especially some of the brands. But generally, it feels like these are big time, like prestige moments, like the biggest moment of the year for the advertising, wings of these massive corporations, right? That are buying these Super Bowl ads, and the way it really goes over the top, like how this is the soul of America and the spirit of our people and all this, and this is who we are, and they're like selling some bullshit, Coca-Cola, right? It's like, come on, it's just so. I don't know where I'm trying to get at, Dre, or if you felt that way watching these over-the-top Super Bowl commercials.
I'm going to take a sideways tangent because I didn't have that one on the commercials, but I did get to see him. The reason I'm going to take a sideways glance is to say I'm going to compliment NFL.com. So I forgot the Super Bowl was on because we had stuff going on over the weekend. And then I came home and I was like, I'll check NFL.com just to see the score. And it was live streaming there. They said you can watch the game, and it just had an embedded player on NFL.com. I was like, okay, cool. And I watched it, and then of course it showed the commercials, and it was crystal clear. It was a very nice viewing experience. And my takeaway, and I tweeted about this, was I went, holy cow, this puts League Pass to shame. And this is a natively embedded freaking game on NFL.com. And you can't tell me that there's not a ton of volume, right? Because it's Super Bowl Sunday. It's going to be the biggest day in NFL history, or not NFL history overall, but of. So I went, wow, this was a really good viewing experience. If NBA League Pass could get to this, it would be something, wouldn't it? And then a lot of the ads. I mean, I think we're cynical and jaded on that, and that's kind of. I think exactly what you're saying. That there are no heroes in the Super Bowl story, right? You have. All teams have problematic aspects. I've even heard that the 49ers name is also weird, right? Naming it after the gold rush and all that is problematic. Yeah. So nothing, there's no one to just root for cleanly in these sports. And then when you know that it's put on by corporations, and these corporations are trying to say, yeah, we're the good people too. And you're like, no, you caused that issue, right? Or you were part of it, or you don't care about that. You were more than happy to look the other way.
That's what it is, Dre. That's what it is. It's these corporations. Okay, so there's one kind of flavor of corporate Super Bowl ads where it's like, look at this charity work we've done. I saw a few of those during the Super Bowl, right? Look at this money we've raised for such and such a cause. Yeah, why do people have to depend on your bullshit charity? Why don't you actually pay some taxes? And then people can use that money themselves instead of depending on you. Anyway, that's my my anti-corporate Super Bowl rant.
Went up a lot before where it is, the trying to get being a shrewd business while simultaneously trying to get praise for the ways you subvert the rules to be that shrewd is frustrating. You simultaneously want praise for doing like tax-exempt charities that you are doing as a way to get around paying taxes while you're also doing tax loopholes and stuff. and then bragging about, using the fact you have the tax loopholes to make more money. It's like you're trying to play both sides, and I think being frustrated at that is the correct response.
Yeah,
I
yep.
did want to, I did just want to note on the Super Bowl that the 90% as a good lesson. I'm going to make a few points about Nate Silver here. So the election's going on, and by the way, one weird thing that's going on right now is apparently Mayor Pete might be taking the Iowa
Oh,
caucus. Man,
interesting.
he is surging. This is fascinating.
Are
But
they still in their caucusing, Dre? It started about 2 hours ago, as of our recording time.
I'm looking at the predicted live market score, that we don't know is real or not. But that's going on, and Nate Silver, 538, well-known pundit about this kind of stuff. That stuff is much less secure or known than sports. So we just had a Super Bowl where some of the numbers were telling us a team was a 90% lock to win, and things went the other way. So in the upcoming election that's happening over the course of the next year, a lot of people are going to be saying stuff with certainty, and that is a much less kind environment than the Super Bowl. So just keep that in mind. Second point, actually, I'll see if I can save the silver dig. I'm debating how much I want to talk about Trump's KC foible. Then one more Nate Silver point. I think that's all I got. If you've got anything else on the Super Bowl, I'll let you go.
No, I don't think so. I'm pretty much ready for shout outs. The Trump thing, it's like, does it even matter? Like, he just doesn't care anymore. He just says a bunch of bullshit, right? That's what he's doing here.
So, for those that don't know, which I'd be shocked, Donald Trump tweeted out a congratulatory tweet to the Kansas City Chiefs and basically thanked them on behalf of the state of Kansas. Spoiler alert, the Kansas City Chiefs actually play in Kansas City, Missouri. So they're from the state of Missouri, not the state of Kansas. And of course, very quickly, many people hopped on Trump for being stupid. And this is frustrating for a variety of reasons. First off, yes, Trump's stupid. We know this. Yes, we know Trump doesn't do research and just talks off the cuff. But what's annoying is, well, I'll give this to you, Brian. Kansas City, Missouri is adjacent to Kansas City, Kansas. Yep. They're like right next door, and it's on the border of Kansas City. And honestly, I wouldn't have known Kansas City, Missouri was in Missouri, except in high school I played in a chess tournament that took place in Kansas City, Missouri. And when I arrived, I went, wait, Kansas City isn't in Kansas? And I said, that's stupid. But it is what it's one of these things that I see a lot of people saying, and it reminds me so much of the stupid McDonald's hamburgers that Donald Trump fed a winning national basketball or football, not basketball, winning football team, winning national collegiate football team a while ago, which is people are trying to insult Donald Trump for this. And a majority of people are just going to say, what's the big deal, right? I wouldn't have known either. And that's, first off, hard not to agree with. And I tweeted about this. I said, this is going to get so much more press than the other things he's doing wrong. And it's just very disheartening, right? It's like, of the things you could criticize Trump for, trying to give a phony baloney congratulatory tweet to a winning Super Bowl team to look hip, right? That's a political thing to do, right? Politicians forever have been like, this amazing team does great, and they're just trying to make sure the voters like them or whatever, right? This is a classic thing that, say, musicians, we brought that up on the show before. A musician when traveling will do, right? You come to Green Bay and you say, go Pack, go, because you're trying to get the crowd on your side.
Or even pro wrestling, right? You can get the cheap heat by insulting that city's teams.
The Rock would do that. The Rock, I mean, of course, he's not unique, and it's been going on forever, but The Rock is the one I would know about. Any city he would go into, if the team had lost the night before, he'd say, wow, those Lakers really suck, right? If he went to LA, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just a well-known political tactic, right? Compliment or insult the local sports team to get approval. And Trump just basically, face planted and admitting that he didn't really know what he was talking about. But we know this, right? Like, this is already a disingenuous act that we know is disingenuous because every politician ever does it, and most people aren't going to care. So that was what frustrated me, is going, Donald Trump does this stupid thing in relation to the Super Bowl. It's going to get a bunch of coverage, and it doesn't matter. And the things you should be blasting him for are not. Like, he's going to get away with not getting impeached, right? Like, it's a sham trial, right? No witnesses are being called. That's going on, and we're going to be like, oh my God, he didn't know geography. It's like, we already knew he didn't know geography. That doesn't affect, political policies. It doesn't affect U.S. policies that impact lots of people. So
apologize for being pedantic, Dre, but he is still impeached. What will happen is he'll be acquitted, but he will still be impeached, regardless if he's acquitted or not. So that's one thing to remember. That never goes away, right? With Bill Clinton, we still talk about how he's impeached, even though he was acquitted as well. So
no president has made it through both, right? The House and the Senate, because I think what Johnson
was acquitted by like 1 or 2 votes, something like that, and then of course Nixon resigned because he would have been found guilty.
So yeah, I mean, apparently, I mean, it's the Constitution is supposed to provide checks and balances, and impeachment is supposed to be the tool to keep the president in check, and there is yet to be a president that has been successfully impeached. Apparently, you have to rely on presidential shame to get presidents to do the right thing, which is not a good thing with the president.
I could not agree more strongly with what you just said, though, and I wish I had said it myself. I'm jealous. This is a shiny object that doesn't matter at all, and yeah, we should be paying attention to other things.
Right. Last point, because I'm just a petty person. Like I mentioned, the Iowa caucus is going on right now, and Nate Silver was insulting some pollster data. And he basically said, if you're a pollster that gets data, just provide the data, not your model outputs, because that's what he needs for his models. And he says basically, providing a model as an input to another model doesn't even make sense. It isn't how they want to do it at 538. So he's basically complaining about data. And the reason this got me laughing is, for those that don't know, Nate Silver and 538 have made a bunch of basketball metrics that we have had problems with. And feeding a model to another model is a stupidly bad way to do basketball analytics, but it's caught on in vogue. BPM, PIPM, I think Draymond and Raptor both do this now at 538. So I was laughing to myself. This has happened on several occasions now where Nate Silver has come out and said something about bad data analysis, and I laughed to myself, and it's petty and it doesn't matter, Brian, because no one else is going to notice. I'm like, you're talking about yourself. The stuff we criticize you for on this show all the time, that everybody says we're wrong about, you are saying not to do, and it's just a moral victory, but I thought I'd have that.
Yeah, and this echoes a criticism of 538 that I've had in the past, which is, you know, Nate Silver is a polling specialist, right? That's what he works on. But then the 538 website has all these other categories, right? Sports, which, you know, we hit him on, but also, you know, what it has like science and all these other areas, right, where they talk about. And my criticism has always been, well, I don't want to say stick to politics, but their articles have been weaker in the non-political categories. So, yeah, I think that's a problem here.
But I think you've also said one of the hardest parts about a site like 538 is, first off, if you're trying to profess to be data nerds, that's just a hard category to put yourself into. It can take an awful lot of work to get domain-specific knowledge. We've noted that ourselves, which is we're analytics nerds about basketball, and there have been a couple times when we talk other stuff. I notice it all the time when I talk football too. I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm not much better than a random person to ask about the subject, and I might even be worse because I might have some arrogance myself. So that's the first problem, right? Domain-specific knowledge doesn't always transfer. And then additionally, this is the complement, kind of, I'd say you've given 538, which is when you have the task of producing regular content daily, and you always have to have a take, you just do not have the time to give the analysis that's required. And this is a problem with our well, I'd say problem with media forever, right? Media has always been driven by engagement, by the number of people looking. You want to sell as many papers as possible, get as many click views as possible. So there is an incentive for a site like 538 to do quick analysis so it gets up timely, right? And to do something that's headline getting so that people will actually look. And there just is not the time to do the great analysis that's required for that nice Venn diagram of the clickbaity headline piece that has good analysis with, you know, a good conclusion. That is a really, really fine line to balance, and most sites don't. And that's the one credit we'll give to 538. We talked a lot at the start of the show about like understanding incentives and stuff, and that's basically it. The incentive for 538 is to get regular content that is perceived as analytically geeky, that is also, you know, engaging and gets people to click. and it's hard to do that as well. And like I said, I just laugh every time I see Nate Silver come out and say, this data analysis is bad. Here's why. And I'm like, you're talking about yourself, but no one notices.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, like, I'm not an academic, so I'm not the best person to talk about this. But when you're reading an article, you can still kind of tell, if how much rigor went into it, or if they're on a deadline or not. Like, if you read any of the things Greg Steele's been putting out the past few months, you can tell, like, this is what he set out to do and he did it. He wasn't under a deadline. It's a lot more coherent. So, yeah, I think that's a tough thing for the 538 to deal with.
All right. Well, that was a ton. We'll have All-Star on the ballot for next week. So if you have any comments about the All-Star game, if I actually put this anywhere where you can comment, as mentioned, apologies. I've been doing like show notes because I've been dealing with a sick kid for the last month. He is kind of healthy this week, kind of. He injured himself this weekend. So that's life with a toddler. So hopefully I'll get show notes up. But if I don't, you can follow on Twitter, myself, Nerd Numbers, or Brian Foster, Boxscore Brian. If you have any comments on the All-Star game for next week's show, that's what we talk about. I do have at least a shout-out, Brian, so I can do that. If you've got one first, I'll let you go.
Yeah, well, shout out to you for coming on the show tonight, and to your son. I hope he gets better. I did think of another shout-out, though, in the middle of this episode when you were talking about the origin of the 49ers term, which is, of course, the year 1849 when the gold rush in California really got going, and that's kind of what pushed California to becoming a state, right? So my shout out is to the Cynical Historian on YouTube. He has a series on California history. It's these great, 10 or so minute episodes. And, I love history, so it's great watching his YouTube series.
Nice. I'm also going to give out to a show. I'm going to give it out to The Good Place, which finally wrapped up. Very poignant ending. If you have not caught up on The Good Place, first off, the seasons are short. I think they're like 13 episode seasons. Really easy to get through. A heck of a lot of fun show. I really enjoyed it. We talk moral philosophy on this show from time to time. So good show to watch for that. Some of the best acting. So check the Good Place finale did not disappoint. Check it out if you didn't. That's my shout out. All right. This has been the Boxscore Geek Show. If you found us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live most Mondays around 8:30 p.m. Central Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Channel Nerd Numbers on or twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers, and you can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. We have a iTunes and Stitcher podcast that you can find at the Boxscore Geek Show. As mentioned, I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, Nerd Numbers on Twitter, Brian Foster, Boxscore Brian on Twitter. Hope your team trades for Andre Iguodala, and if not, we'll see you next week.